You're listening to the Slavic Literature Pod, your shelf help guide to all things Slavic.
I'm Matt Gerasimovich, PhD candidate at Northwestern University, studying Russian literature and film.
And I'm Cameron Lalana, a literature enthusiast. We're two friends who met studying in Russia. We like talking about books so much that we made it into a podcast.
This week, you are joining us in the office for Office Hours. It's a break from our normal content where we're going to discuss things that we read outside the show, delve deep into strange literary subcultures, and answer listener questions. We hope you'll learn something along the way, but if not, at least you'll be getting some extra credit.
If you're interested in supporting us and our mission to help educate you through both our mainline episodes and our office hours for that essential extra credit, you can head on over to our website, slaviclitpod.com. And this month, we are starting off our office hours with the usual book of the month. So Matt, I have to ask you, what have you been reading lately?
Yeah, so I finally got along to maybe touching my New York Review of Books backlog that I've had building up.
Have you ever touched it before, or has it just been a goal to start?
This is the first. Okay. When I subscribed to their book club like over a year ago, probably, I was like, this will be great.
Right.
And it has been great, and they look killer up on my bookshelf.
Yeah.
But this is the set in the series that I'm really guilty of owning but not having read and probably not going to read for a little bit, at least not all of them. We'll see. I like getting a new book in the mail every month. Sue me.
I can't argue with that. That's a great feeling.
Don't sue me.
Don't
Actually, that was a joke.
But if you do, contact me. I'll give you the details.
Legal said I had to clarify.
Legal said, please stop saying sue me as a phrase. And they also asked me to stop using the phrase comments, questions, threats. Please direct them to my email. Legal didn't love that one either.
Yeah. Well, it was getting a little dangerous in your email for a bit there.
It was, yeah. Once they tracked down my IP, I realized that maybe it was time.
It was all over. So anyways, I cracked open the first one sequentially. I'm going to read them all in the order I got them because that's how I work. It makes me feel like I'm making progress. I like it.
Sure, yeah.
So I read Lament for Julia by Susan Taubes this month. Well, it's probably been like 2 months actually ago that I had read it in preparation for this episode that we meant to record sooner than we did.
Yes.
So, whoops. And I remember a good bit of it. I liked it a lot more than what I read last month, which was Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, not David Lynch. Unfortunately. Yeah. So I didn't really look that much into Susan Taubes, just a little bit because I was I was curious after reading. And she was a Hungarian-American writer. She was really interested in religion. She's a PhD. She taught religion at Columbia with her husband, who was also a philosopher, a scholar teaching at Columbia. And she tragically killed herself at the age of 41. And she wrote another book called Divorcing, which was also published by New York Review of Books. And it didn't perform well when she published it, and it caused her like a lot of distress. And I have not read that, but I did immediately purchase it after I read Lament for Julia because I was like, this goes insanely hard, and I need more of it. There are some short stories in the back of this, which are really cool. I didn't actually make my way through them yet, but I plan to. Lament for Julia, it's like 126 pages, I think. How would I describe it? It's a sort of novella, sort of exploration, sort of coming of all ages, shall I say. It's the story of Julia and Julia's conscience, maybe, or some spirit that is attached to Julia. It's not really clear, like, who the narrator is, but it is this kind of ephemeral being. We're not really sure. I think maybe it's kind of named towards the end. I don't know. And it is so fascinating the way that the story is written without really giving any direct insight to Julia. It's all told from, this kind of possessive external narrator, and I just found it insanely interesting. And then this sort of, I'll slightly spoil. I mean, if you care about that, skip ahead a touch. But just this sort of kind of frantic breakdown of identity by the end of the book, a sort of like disintegration of the narrative, and the way that this sort of thing that was external, this question about was it external this whole time, like, where does it come from, how does it fit in? It's just, I don't know, like, I don't want to like read too much into it, but a lot of people can write obviously a lot of different things, but like when I had read that she had killed herself, again, I know that's how this is going to sound, but like there was something in this book that was profoundly sad and profoundly distressing as I was reading it. And there were definitely moments of really great biting humor in a really particular sort of way. But there were also just like this kind of undertone by the end. I really had to like, I sat there for a while when I was done with this. I was just like sitting in bed, laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, just for like a little longer than I should have,
Right.
So needless to say, I had to walk away from this for a little bit when I was done, because I found it to be very affecting personally. But I had a great time other than that, other than being kind of depressed at the ending.
Other than being sent into a depressive episode, I had a fantastic time.
No, I thought the writing was beautiful. It was fun. It was whimsical. It was phenomenal, I thought, actually, which is why I bought her novel Divorcing immediately after. And I think the top review I had read when I was buying it online was somebody being like, I didn't like it. I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. And I thought, oh, we are really in for one here. I can't wait. Once I make it through the other like 15 New York Review of Books copies that I have left.
Unstoppable.
Then it's time for Divorcing.
Right. Yeah, it seems to nice light reads. I mean, you would expect nothing else from your Slavic literature podcasters, right?
It actually kind of was light. Like, I mean, not thematically, but like the prose was pretty light. It was like a very quick read. The way it's kind of broken up, it's not these long, dense chapters. It's kind of quick, almost fragments and snippets at times, and parts of it were fun for sure.
Fun for sure. I have to assume immediately followed by a quite deep dip in the mood.
Well, my mood did dip at the end, but
right. Well, any standout moments for you? Any pieces of prose, moments, themes?
Honestly, I didn't even underline in this really, because I read it so quick because I was having such a good time, and now it's been so long that I've read it. I feel like I can't do it justice to go back, and that's my great shame on presenting on this month.
That's fair. Well, you know what? Short version, you get the Roger Ebert 2 thumbs up for Lament for Julia.
Yeah, this is a Matt Kramer must buy. We should create our own scale like him. I think he'd sue us.
We possibly. Should we just bring back the one to Khrushchev scale? Not one to Khrushchev, one to Yeltsin, excuse me.
You're excused. Sorry, I'm trying to find Jim Cramer's stock scale. What does he always yell? Well, I'll get on it. I
can only assume he yells mad money every time he starts the show and someone asks him a question.
He's got to have a lot of buttons.
I've never seen it, but I have to assume he's got a soundboard.
You've never seen Jim Cramer's Mad Money?
No. Well, somehow, despite working within the same, I think either in the same like company or owned by the same company as CNBC, I have never watched Jim Cramer's show.
Wow, shame. That's worse than my shame.
Yeah, well, my biggest shame is I don't even know how like legally related CNBC was to NBC as a. That's a bigger okay. Owned by NBCU. I think my station was also anyway. Different question.
I thought it was close to NBC, which is what the C was for.
No. It could be. I think it is close to us, close to our hearts, all of us. Mm-hmm. I mean, we do hold CNBC close to our hearts. What would we do as Americans without CNBC to tell us who to put our penny stocks into? The literally $5s of dollars I've invested all came from CNBC knowledge.
Yeah, but like I don't know what I paid in New York Review Books, only like $10 a month maybe. Free book that I don't read for a while. And then when I do, it's awesome.
I've wasted all $25 investments. I should have put it into that book club.
Yeah, you really should have.
All right. Well,
don't invest, purchase books.
That's the message of our podcast. And that's been our show tonight, folks. Good night.
No, this my summation of this was that I was really glad to have gotten into this, and I wasn't glad then to immediately have more books to read by her, or at least another one to read by her, because I was like, oh man, I already have so many in my backlog
Right.
that I have to get through. But I'm looking forward to it. Strong recommend for me this month.
All right. 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, no controversy for me.
No.
I'll hand it over to controversial Cameron.
Controversial. Well, I don't think I'm controversial. I'm just going to have some criticisms of apparently.
Why do they call you that if not?
Why would it rhyme like that?
Why would it rhyme?
Why would it have that consonance? I read now also like 2 months ago Z by Vassilis Vassilikos, which is a novel I've been meaning to get to for literally 2 years. A friend of ours visited me. We went to San Francisco like 2 years ago, and I bought it. She's Greek, and I bought it because she told me some cool stuff about it when we were at the bookstore of Lights. And I have taken these many years to read it. It's good. It's based on the story, essentially a fictionalized version of the 1963 murder of a Greek, obviously, MP, the socialist Grigoris Lambrakis, told from a broad array of perspectives, including his murderers, his supporters, himself, his family, those who were complicit with the murderers. And it is, if you're interested in Greece at any level, it's an absolute must. It has Vassilikos is a quite prodigious author, as I understand, in the Greek language. Not so much in English, but right. This is like, it's big enough that when you go to book sales at libraries, Matt, do you have like record sections at yours? Like
vinyls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're always, there's always a section for old movies, and like they're all well-known classics. I found the Z, the movie soundtrack for Z at a library sale in like California Central Valley. So if it made its way out there,
you do find some weird stuff at your sales, though.
That's true. There is a sizable Greek community in that town. That I'll give it that. So maybe not the average city, neither here nor there. Still, a very important book. It is a must read if you're interested in Greece. It really utilizes this technique, which I thought was really fun. When I was a teenager, I really wanted to be a writer, and I was known as like the best character writer of all my friends. We all had our thing, which we were good at. I was a good character writer. And the only thing
what were your other friends good at?
They were good at either the hard science. So if someone wanted to do a scientific story in space and you wanted someone to design a non-carbon based planet and life system, ecosystem from the ground up, other friends.
Yeah, they sound cool.
Yeah, super. The coolest you could imagine. Nothing's cooler than thematic and detailed consistency. But the only thing I could really think of was like, think about the world through how that character would see it and write their POV sections through that. What do they pay attention to? What do they not pay attention to? And Vassilikos kind of takes that to an extreme where the story is told, you're jumping around from character to character, and it is so extremely from their point of view that even conversations they have are never really the conversations they're really having. And there's this one really extreme example where I've got this character, Yango, who is one of the murderers of the Lambrakis stand-in in the movie, as he kind of conveys his various conversations for the day, and you go to other characters who encounter him, who all then experience those conversations differently because there were literally pages of conversation that he left out or considered unimportant, which they then expound on. And I think is a way to convey a story, especially one which is based on conspiracy. And I mean, in a literal sense, the conspiracy to murder this socialist MP from a number of government officials who then put that task down to non-affiliates, people not affiliated directly with them as government officials to get away with that. I thought that was a really effective storytelling technique. I thought this was a great story from that perspective. It portrays the complicity, and maybe this is something that I'm particularly sensitive to because when I was training to be a journalist in college, that was in the era of a lot of Black Lives Matter protests. I think especially around that time, Philando Castile, Stephen Clark was killed in about 15 minutes from where I went to school. And there was that was something that was very present for me. And in that time doing a lot of reporting on it, something I noticed was the policing of protests was something I paid a lot of attention to, because you could see quite often complicity or between police departments and hard right, even neo-Nazi militias or groups who they would partner with to infiltrate or otherwise keep an eye on these protests. There was a big thing, and even I think it was Oregon with a scandal related to that. So that because I think I went through college and that was still a big issue for protests, that this particular element of the story really hit home for me. And it was good. There were a couple of things that confused me. After the Lambrakis stand-in dies, there are many people, friends, his wife, who all mourn him, and it keeps happening as they reflect on the place of a life. And it started to get kind of cloying. Like the prose was very purple prosy, and to the extent that when I was talking to that same friend recently, telling her that I finally read this book, I asked her, she's Greek, she can read Greek naturally. Can she read the book and tell me, is this prose bad in Greek too, or is this an artifact of translation? I don't know. But either way, that didn't hit home for me. And there's also a guy called Vango the Pederast, who is just a rapist, like a child molester, that keeps being brought up and doesn't really go anywhere. That's just a fact of the novel. I guess it builds out the world. I don't know if that's because all these characters are based on real people, more or less, based on the trial. So I don't know if that's reflective of an actual person, or if that was just like Vassilikos being like, look, these guys are sickos. Some of them are pedophiles. I don't know. But
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
It sounds interesting, though.
No, it's definitely a worthwhile novel.
Not the pedophile part, but the construction part.
Now they bring up Vango the Pederast. Yeah, so that's how I feel about Z. I thought it was quite good, with a couple things that didn't hit home for me. There's a lot of the Lambrakis stand-in really articulates this, like, okay, I'm not a capitalist and I'm not a communist. I'm really for a kind of a third wayism, which I think from our standing today seems a little weird. I'm a
centrist.
Right? Well, like third wayism in the 60s is, I would say that's a more serious movement. That's different. It doesn't hit home today because the third wayist movement amounts to nothing, essentially. I shouldn't say that. It is strongly countered by every other force in the world at that time, basically. So
leading it to amount to nothing.
Yes. But I thought, I don't know. Yeah, it's a worthwhile novel. It's got some strange features.
We're going to have upset one specific viewer by that. We're going to get somebody, how dare you?
I know. Well, if you have any complaints, comments, questions, or threats, email them to Cameron T. Lalana at gmail.com. I will not get the email the other way around. You would think I would, but I won't.
We had that when we did the Lenin What Is to Be Done, where we referenced one obscure political writing. We're like, yeah, it's not really that important. And we kind of meant like for the scope of what we were doing.
Yeah.
Had somebody tell you about how it actually was important and we should have gone into it.
Yeah, that wasn't just somebody out of nowhere. That was someone I knew who reached out to me. He's like, hey, I listened to the podcast and I really take issue with this. And she was getting her master's in applied theater in London at the time. So who was I to say, yeah, I know more than this than you? Clearly I don't.
Yeah. But who has a microphone?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. We got the power.
That's right. I always remember that. Yeah. What's mightier?
What is mightier? Pen.
The microphone or the sword?
That's right.
The sword.
The sword.
It's a sword.
Yeah. Well, if it weren't for the microphone, the Rwandan genocide couldn't have happened. So take that, right. Sword adherence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Matt's done with the fun and games now.
Yeah. Cameron killed my fun and games.
Every time I bring up Radio Rwanda, sometimes it kills the mood somehow.
Yeah.
I don't really quite know. I also want to mention
that and the bombing of Japan just make you an excellent addition to any dinner party.
It's amazing that I keep getting invited places ever again.
Yeah.
I also want to mention briefly, I'm reading currently The Big Green Tent by Ludmila Ulitskaya, and if you're looking for a book, I would definitely recommend The Big Green Tent. We've covered her on the podcast repeatedly before. She's a great writer. She's a great writer of characters, and The Big Green Tent is this typically sprawling novel of three young men growing up in the Soviet Union in the 60s to 80s and all the things that come with it. And it is well worth your time, especially if you like stories that unfold non-sequentially.
I do.
So that's a book for you, Matt.
I love a lot of stories, though.
Yeah, that's why we have this podcast, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes, like, when people ask me what I like to read, I got to be honest, I really don't know.
Well,
I like to read a lot of things.
That's fair. Well, have you ever considered that maybe that's because when we read something, we're tempted to take a meaning away from it, analyze it, if you will, and maybe just maybe, the literary analysis is absolutely pointless?
I think it is, actually.
Well, why don't you elaborate on that?
So, a piece of literature, it's marked by its ability to entertain several different contradictory, unreconcilable interpretations at the same time. If there were only one and only one correct interpretation of a work, I would say it's probably unlikely that any reader would ever discover it, and if the author is not the one who dictates the meaning of the text, then it is not likely that anyone would ever discover it. You following me? Because I'm not.
No, not
This
really.
is because each reader is embedded in a different cultural context. Think about that. We live in the context of all which, operating on a different moral and political assumptions, and with different propensities, nice word, for reacting to and interpreting social behavior. The interpretation each reader creates is dependent on them as a subject, themselves determined by causes outside of their control. It's like ChatGPT had a stroke.
If you haven't,
This is how my students write when they're really trying to reach the word count.
yeah. So if you haven't caught on by now, we have moved into literary beatdown or Matt v. Reddit, depending on your preferred name. This is coming from a post in r/literature, very confusingly worded one, titled.
It has no upvotes. I don't want to.
Yes.
There are a lot of bad things posted that people take seriously. This was not one of them.
No. Yeah. Everyone in the comments is coming for OP. And literary analysis is absolutely pointless. Matt and I have a debate going on, and that is, we're both certain this was written by ChatGPT. Our question is, Did the person who posted this put that prompt of ChatGPT, read this and say, I agree with that, I want to argue on r/literature, or at least make them mad? I don't think OP is in the comments here. Or did the original poster put that in and think this is great bait and post that on r/literature? And we have no answer for that one. But it was great bait
I'm not really
either
sure
way.
what it's bait. Because sometimes like people will post things to get like upvotes just for, I don't know, whatever, just cause, they're karma farming. What else are you gonna do on Reddit besides have meaningless internet points? There's no points being given. This man is, I'm assuming, a man, just kind of getting beat down in the comments.
Maybe that's
and now on our podcast.
Maybe that's what OP wanted. Just what's that old Twitter post that gets thrown around quite often of the no, I'm not going to respond to that. This person clearly has a fetish for being yelled at.
I gotta send you something, not for the podcast.
Oh, excellent! I look forward to it. Well, I think the reason why we took this is because, one, there's not a lot of good content on Reddit recently. They've been all above board. Usually, even r/Dostoevsky usually has something that we can say, "Hey, this is a funny thing," but they were all, as far as we checked. Nice. It's got the thing that sent me. As far as we could check, they were behaving admirably and having good discussion. So you get the gold star today.
No, they weren't.
Well,
they weren't, but it would have been mean-spirited to bring that to the show.
they were being very honest about themselves today. So it felt that was their space to talk about it.
It was like the worst men's support group you've ever been to.
But this particular piece, regardless of whether or not it is meant to bait people into anger or is a genuine expression of someone's beliefs, I do think I've encountered people who do essentially believe what this is trying to argue. That the basic idea here, if you got lost, that's fine. It's not really arguing anything coherent. But the basic idea, I think, is, look, why do we try to come up, what is the point of it trying to analyze a book? You can see this expressed on social media or online as like the making fun of, what does the green light represent? Having many Americans having
no, the blue curtains, right?
Blue
Isn't
curtains,
that the
yeah,
one?
that's right. Blue curtains or green light. I don't think blue curtains relate to like a real book. I think it's just a meme. Green light is Great
Then
Gatsby.
David Lynch took that personally. I said, here's some red curtains. What do they mean? What do they mean, funny guy? You think it's so funny? Watch 3 seasons of the movie. See if you can figure it out.
You think you're smart? I've got the Black Lodge and the White Lodge. Now tell me, which one?
Which one are we in? Let's start there.
Right. But I think this attitude exists because, like, someone... Okay, let's play devil's advocate. You look at a book, everyone comes in with their own angle, perspective, and experiences, and they say, well, this is what I took away. And then someone else comes in with their own experiences, background, whatever, and they have a completely different takeaway. So then, therefore, is literature analysis pointless if everyone is taking their own perspective in? The author's will means nothing. It's all what we own, what we want to take out of it, and thereby, anyone individual literary analysis is useless outside of that person.
Although, first of all, I would say, why is that so bad?
Sure, yeah.
Why is it bad for people to take different things away from it? I never really got that argument, you know?
Yeah, I don't get it either. I don't make it, but I do encounter it, certainly. I'm trying to do a good faith version of this argument as far as I can have encountered it.
No, I think you're right. I think people do think that because, like, I think that's like our obsession with, you know, objectivity, basically. And I just personally don't buy it. I think it's a fantasy. I think there are some things we can say generally might hold true about certain works, and you know that's a different school of thought, right? Trying to look at things more objectively, and you get interesting results. But again, I still believe that's just kind of one way to look at it.
Yeah, I think there was an interesting sentence towards the end of this. Well, there's a lot of interesting sentences in this piece, but either the author and or ChatGPT writes, "Fiction is an enjoyable and effective means of conveying ideas, sentiments, and emotions, but what can be conveyed in a whole book through meticulously designed character interactions and event sequences can, in the end, only stand on the merits of its evidence and rational soundness." And I think that gets at the essential problem, which is when you are trying to address...
What evidence?
Right, well...
What are you trying to prove? Detective?
I think that gets to the essential heart of this question, which is just a fundamental mismatch in what is our goal here. When we write a text, are we trying to convey something to the reader, or is it for the reader to interpret on their own? I think if you want to be really base about it, you could say this is the idea of death. Roland Barthes' Death of the Author, who I think that concept is way over applied and goes way beyond.
Well, that's what he's talking about here. Clearly. Right.
Yeah. In this case, that's what I think they're moving towards that idea. And it just, going back to your point earlier, this is where the fundamental mismatch is just never going to be solved, I think, between people who see it this way and people who don't, because these are all, I think, if that was a true premise, those would be fair questions to ask. The problem is, I don't think the premise can be entertained. And that is the fundamental problem that I think will never be resolved.
Also, it's a completely contradictory post because he says, okay, nothing's rational, nothing's objective, and then the first sentence of the concluding paragraph, I enjoy fiction once in a while. Nice burn. But the absurd degree to which the discussion of cool stories has been formalized, replete with literary devices and textual evidence, is perplexing. And then saying, it only has its evidence to stand on. And I'm like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
He wants something objective, evidence, rational, and then the opening sentences, a piece of literature is marked by its ability to entertain several different contradictory, unreconcilable interpretations at the same time. So what do you want? What is it? Which is it?
The first sentence was written by Bakhtin, and the rest was by ChatGPT.
I think both are wrong. How about that?
But yeah, well, I mean, regardless of whether this was written by a real human being or not, it really does speak to that there is a bit of a literature analysis in this post. And the second paragraph,
it's so bold of you to call a comparison between the Adventures of Tom Sawyer and the Chronicles of Narnia literary analysis.
Well, their analysis of us. Both two different readers could say that Tom in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer is a fundamentally bad child or is a fundamentally good child. Not the point of Tom Sawyer, but hey, neither here nor there. Or whether the Chronicles...
That he had adventures.
Whether the wardrobe from the Narnia Chronicles... This makes me believe maybe it was a real person, because I think ChatGPT would have gotten the Chronicles of Narnia correct.
Yes, this is how you know it was a real person. That's what's so upsetting. Like with my students, when I'm like, I almost wish you had generated this poorly. I'm more upset that you took time to do this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Okay, whether the wardrobe from the Narnia Chronicles was a symbol for imagination, maturity, the Bible, in parentheses, I've seen this, or whatever else could be reasonably or unreasonably invented. Look, I got to tell you, if you don't see the religious parallels in the Narnia Chronicles, I think you should stop trying literary analysis. That is maybe the most fundamental reading of that particular series, because it was written for children to make them like the Bible. And I think Narnia I think it's a perfectly fine series. I've got no critiques for it. But if you...
And Cameron would like to replace the Bible with Narnia.
The Adventures, the Chronicles of Narnia. Yes, I would. I think it's a perfectly fine series. If you have no strong opinion on whether or not the Bible has a strong influence over the Narnia, I'm saying it now, the Chronicles of Narnia, you maybe a literary analysis is not for you. Just enjoy the books. Yeah. It's okay. Don't think too deeply about what Aslan is doing.
They like to. They say they enjoy cool stories, and they even enjoy fiction once in a while. So that's good.
Yeah. Anyway, everyone in the comments is coming down on this person, so could be bait. We could have fallen for it. We could be hook, line, and sinker on this one.
I'm taking the bait, but it's filling like half an episode.
Everyone else in the comments does too. These are the most paragraphs I think I've ever seen in any given Reddit post.
I like this one. Damn, seems like a lot of scholars are going to lose their jobs now. I also think that the idea that art is created for you or for some sort of reception, that's nice. That's nice that you feel that way. I'm not sure it all was. Some of it, I mean, all of it basically, I think, is more or less created with an audience in mind. But I don't know that, like, the true value of art, I don't know is in its reception, but rather just its creation.
Right.
You know?
Well,
that's me, though.
No, I agree. Shocking. But I think that also...
Okay, copycat Cameron.
I think that also leads into this other kind of... because, okay, so if you don't analyze literary books, you know, what...
Who analyzes the analyzers?
That's what we're here for.
Yep.
But
we do.
But it makes me... So we talked about Jash Dilani, I think 2 office hours, maybe 3 office hours back, and his fantastic book... I forget the name of it. Was it Hit Reverse or something like that?
Don't publicize this.
Yeah, but anyway, so he kept there was like a week where he was emailing mass emails, not me in particular. I guess excerpts from Medium articles. I have to assume that he wrote.
Wait, it was a mass email?
Well, I have to assume it was.
I paid him to write for you specifically.
Oh, shit. Oh, well, then he was definitely targeting me in that case.
Oh, man.
He was writing bait. It was the perfect bait. So you got your money's worth.
Okay, good.
But it makes me think of this one particular email he wrote, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm kind of paraphrasing it for you. But essentially, the idea is, look, the problem with art today is that we accept everything. And in traditional good art, they reject ugliness and they accept beauty. And today, in this is as close as an exact quote I can get right now. People are obsessed with art that makes them think. What does this art say to me? What does this art mean? And then he says, that's not the point of art. The point of art is to know and understand beauty. And I think, not to say that this person believes this one-to-one, but I think that this is the end result of that point of view, where you reject the idea that we can meaningfully understand literature based on textual evidence, which is that art exists not for us to challenge ourselves, not for us to make us think. It was very telling phrasing there. No, it doesn't exist for us in any way to appreciate something, some element of life. Art exists to be beautiful, and we should reject what is ugly, and we should accept what is beautiful. And what those things are, now that's just not something to be questioned. That's something to be given to us. And it's this really childish view of the world where it's not that you want to make your own way. It's you want to be told what is beautiful and you want to be told what is ugly. And what should you be throwing your hate against? What should you hate and what should you love? And then you do those things. I'm not saying this person believes that, but I do think that that is the end result of this point of view. Not that everyone gets to, like, you all naturally go along there, but if you take it to an extreme, and there are people who live on those extremes, that you have this incredibly infantile view of what art is and can be. And unfortunately, people who are that infantile, and frankly, beyond that, the worst insult I can give to someone is incurious. These kind of incurious people have done some of the most damage I can imagine to the human race over our years.
Yeah, although I will say, like, he's probably referring to visual art.
Yes.
Mostly. Right?
Yeah. Well, when he says ugly things, he makes reference to what's the black square, which is who's the name of the artist? I always forget.
Kazimir Malevich.
Yeah. Thank you. He made reference to that, to the banana taped to the wall, to the usual suspects of modernist art that are literally over 100 years old at this point, and they're still mad about. So, hey, I mean,
bold to call that modern art, I guess, right? But okay.
Well, they don't actually engage with art, so they don't know any art to be mad at. They're just mad at things from 100 years ago. There are easily things you could find in the last 5 years to be mad about. It would be such an easy task for them, but they're not interested in art. So they're just repeating things that they were told about that made them mad. Piss Christ from the 80s, I think, could make them mad. That's at least within the last century. I mean, you could really, there's a lot of pieces within the last 100 years that could make you mad, but they're not that interested in it, so they don't pursue that.
No, I also kind of wonder too, like, these beautiful works. I mean, I do think there definitely are works of visual art that are beautiful and that, you know, would probably be near universally acclaimed as such. But I mean, that's one category, that's one thing, right? I mean, there's a lot more to it, of course. And then I also kind of wonder, like, if you got one of these works of art from a great master and you showed it to like 10 people today that had never seen it, would they really be able to distinguish anything about the art other than, you know, its literal form as, like, you know, painting on canvas or whatever, you know, and they say, yeah, that's art because it's on a canvas. Like, you know, like, what's our level of interpretation of art? They're not going to sit there and weep at the beauty of the painting, you know. It's not, I really don't believe that it's 100% universally just some intuition of beauty, you know. I don't buy it.
Well, yeah, because the idea of...
I buy part of it, but not like, yeah, I wouldn't base my whole what is art argument on that.
Right. Well, again, because that gets the fundamental problem of not ever challenging the idea of beauty, because what is beautiful is, ironically, an incredibly subjective thing. And
yeah, that's like the one thing everyone knows about beauty. It's the one, like, colloquialism that we have. It's in the eye of the beholder, baby.
You know, it's...
Like, I mean, that's like... Come on.
If there's folk wisdom, and aphorisms that contradict you, maybe you should reconsider. Not step away. They're not necessarily right. Just consider it.
Just consider. Please consider.
Music, what is beautiful? Hey, look, my girlfriend literally will not let me play Tom Waits when she's around because she hates it that much. But I think Tom Waits is great. So hey, look at that. Differences in the idea of what is beautiful. I'll admit she's probably right. He's probably not beautiful, but I do love him all the same.
Cameron destroys beauty.
Well, maybe that was on me for playing for her his most ugly sounding album, which was really high. That was probably a bad call. That was probably a bad time to introduce it.
Probably. I was just thinking we got a lot of time out of that Reddit post.
Yeah, I know. Well, more than we thought. Well, maybe then this is a good time to take a quick break. So I think we're kind of reaching the end of the content we can get there. Quit from that.
I think so. We'll be back in just a second.
And this episode is brought to you by you, our listeners. You can support independent podcasting by heading to our website, slaviclitpod.com. You'll get access to the notes we used to make this episode, including links to all secondary sources mentioned, which are not a lot in this one, but hey.
If you want to support the show, but you don't want to spend any of your hard-earned Reddit karma, you can join our email list for free at slaviclitpod.com. Or you can leave us a nice review wherever you get your podcasts.
Questions, comments, want to appear on our Office Hours podcasts? Drop us a line. You can reach our voicemail at 209-800-3944. Or you can also email us a voice recording or text question at slaviclitpod@gmail.com. We'll also bring your question onto the podcast and do our best to address it.
All right, let's get back to the show.
Okay, well, at this point, we will proceed to our Cornered by Culture segment, which today is made up of an article or two The first one we should jump into, because this one really caused some consternation in our Discord.
It really did. I don't. Did you post this? I think I found it actually on Reddit.
I think we both found it. My recollection is I posted it on a screenshot from Twitter first, and then I think you gave the actual link.
That's what it was. Because I was like, wait, no, I just read this. Yeah, no, it was funny.
Yes, it is. It
was made for us.
It was tailor-made for us. The article title from the magazine Days Digital reads, "Why don't straight men read novels?"
But the header image is of what could be interpreted as a straight man reading a novel.
Makes you think.
Checkmate, Dazed. Checkmate.
We had some audience reactions. This spawned a lot of good discussion. Before we get there, Matt, I have to ask you, do you have any immediate gut reactions to this? Well, maybe we should talk about what this piece is actually before we react to it.
No, I mean, this was just a comment on the British.
On the British,
what do they call it? Maths. Plural. I don't get it. I was like in the first line, you really took me out of it.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
I don't like the way it feels.
Feels wrong.
Feels wrong.
Just like the Brits.
Yep. Incorrect. Anyways.
But essentially, yes.
Sorry to a third of our audience.
Right. But essentially, the title is correct. It's one of those rare examples that the title does accurately convey the content of the article itself. It is going over...
It's not that deep.
It's not that deep. It's going over content, data provided by Deloitte, of all people, finding that straight men are reading less than... actually, I take that back. It is only predicting boys and men, irrespective of sex, I think, or irrespective of sexuality, spend less time reading than women and girls. I'm not 100% certain where the straight men things comes in as I'm scanning now that I think about it, other than...
Sorry, I just clicked on the Deloitte thing. Yeah. They had 4 people write this. How do I get on this project?
Well, should we email them for you?
I didn't click on the actual... They literally milked this Deloitte article to basically make a whole different article.
I love that.
Because no one's going to click on a Deloitte link.
No. Yeah, I think... I'm just scanning it right now. I think it's irrespective of sexuality. I don't think that was a feature. So that's... I think it might just be a title thing. It was whether or not men or women read was irrespective of sexuality. So I'm trying to figure out where the sexuality came in it.
Oh, yeah. I think if you Control F for straight, it's only in the title.
That's awesome. Well, yeah.
Like I said, the article's not that deep.
Yeah. It basically covers the idea of masculinity in crisis. I don't want to shit on the article specifically because I don't think it's wrong in any particular sense. We're not here to...
It's not right in the right ways,
Yeah. It's I think where both we come in and where basically everyone who responded in our Discord came in was the framing of it is a little strange.
Yeah.
Do you want to read your comment, your immediate reaction to it? I thought that was a fairly good point.
Yeah, I do not remember writing this, but I did write this at one point. I said, the article's conclusion is probably right, but I like how it spends the whole time building itself up against reading for a specific outcome and then concluding by saying men reading will be good because of XYZ outcome, which is that, okay, that was a good comment. I remember that now that I said it out loud again.
I'm glad you still back it.
Because that's what I was just feeling. Because the conclusion is basically you know what, the world will be better if men read, we'll save men by reading.
Right.
Meanwhile, the whole article is we shouldn't read for any specific. Do you know how much pressure is going to be on someone reading to be like, oh my God, I got to save all men by reading.
But yeah, this is something that maybe this is a good question if we ever have Dr. Maya Vinakor back on because so much of the article is concerned with this idea of under capitalism, our desire to be productive. Even in our free time, building our careers, building these skill sets. And that's a lot of where this article comes from, of this idea of self-improvement, ambition, growth mindsets are driving people towards Andrew Tate's... Grind sets are driving people towards...
Learn the lingo.
Thank you, you're right. Towards Andrew Tate rather than, I don't know, John Dos Passos. Whatever you want to say. That's not their example, that's mine. But that... The essential idea of the article here is correct. Again, going back to, I think I would love to have Dr. Maya Vinakor come back and talk about it at some point. This is the idea of lifestyle fascism really deeply ties into these concepts that are expressed to us every single day. So again, the underlying premise of the article, well, a lot of the assumptions of the article, I should say, not wrong, not bad. It's just, I think specifically, this is what both you and I were kind of talking about before the podcast started. And this kind of speaks to what you said. The idea that specifically men reading, the conclusion of the article is, reading is great. It expands your perspective. It would be good if men did it. Straight men did it. Anyone should do it. And our reaction was, I don't know if it really would help us that much, to be frank. I don't know. Reading fiction. Yeah. I don't know if that's like...
Well, look at what's being posted on Reddit. These are people that are reading.
Yeah.
Is it making them better? Is it saving the world?
Frankly, we should be more suspicious of people who read.
Yes, absolutely. What are you reading? What? Put the Dostoevsky down. What are you doing with that?
I feel bad for Dostoevsky fans. He's a great author. It's just his fans really make it feel bad to like him in public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, stop reading.
Stop reading forever.
Yeah,
I think another great point brought up by one of our Discord, by one of our listeners on Discord who writes, currently under the title Chief Grifting Officer, which is, if you want to know the story behind that, you'll have to get into Discord. This is an interesting topic, but I don't think the article is very good. For one thing, it doesn't give data on what percentage of people read fiction at all. If readers are a minority, it might make sense to start by asking what makes a reader rather than what makes straight men not readers. I also think the article assumes certain expectations, assumes certain explanations, and then goes looking for supporting evidence. Kind of getting at the same idea you went there for there. Mm-hmm. And also adding, I would be eager to read an analysis of this without the, quote, what about straight men, unquote, framing, which I think is also a great thing because there's this perpetual cycle of articles of the idea, the article uses the phrase, masculinity is in crisis. And I think that is a very common media trope, the idea of masculinity in crisis or men in crisis because men aren't going to college at the same rates that women are, men are reading fewer novels than women are, right? All these kind of things. And I don't want to be too glib about it because I think it is important to address these issues, but also, what the centrality of masculinity or men in these conversations is, even as a man, pretty striking. Like if straight men are not reading novels, I don't know if that's the end of civilization. Straight men are doing a lot of worse things in the world. That we should maybe address first. I don't know.
I do agree with this comment though that we got because in general, I would say the reading public has always been pretty small. And so I don't know that what you're seeing proportionately or disproportionately expands where the article talks about okay, yeah, there are more women reading than men, but what are they reading? Because I think the kind of literature that the article ascribes as positive change to, I'm not 100% convinced is what it's talking about women are reading, because it's largely talking about young adult fiction and teenage girls and how big of a market that is. And so, are people better for reading YA? I don't know, maybe, but I don't know that that's exactly what the article's getting at. It sort of obfuscates that part of it a little bit, just to kind of hammer home the men not doing it.
Yeah, but it also there's an extra layer where I think that becomes really relevant of what are people reading is a relevant question, but also this is specifically in the realm of, hopefully if men read, then they won't be attracted to people like Andrew Tate, this kind of toxic masculinity figures, and I'm sympathetic to that understanding, but I'm also incredibly skeptical of it. I would say most people I know personally who are in that direction do tend to read. The people who I know who don't read are not necessarily Andrew Tate fans.
No, they're just bland, generally.
I think if you are concerned about the idea of masculinity in crisis, which I think is a fair concern to have in general, I think we spend too much ink on it, but I think it's a fair thing to ask about I think it's a fair question to ask, how do we raise our children, those who will be men, those who will be women, those who will be those who will not be either. How do we raise them to be good adults? And I think that's that is an incredibly important question to ask. How do we find role models? And maybe I'm thinking about this more because I'm now around younger people who I interact with more. But just how do you provide a good role model? How do you help them navigate issues that you or I may have run into? It maybe took us years to resolve. for our own personal growth, and how do you help them get over that faster? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. That's something you gotta accept. But these are important questions, but I think sometimes framing it in this way undercuts the importance of like this is an interesting thing. We got criticized a while back for over applying the political question, but I think this is a great example of like just reading more does not solve this issue. If you really want to address this crisis, which I think is not only something addresses or impacts young boys, it also impacts everyone else in the world, and they should also be getting these kind of support. You've got to be thinking about how can we meaningfully provide a class of people, teachers, role models, whatever, who can help young people grow into the best versions of themselves. But that's not what these articles are addressing. That's not what these questions are addressing, and it's not a sexy question to write about in the same way. It doesn't hit the same. It doesn't have that title that you'd click on in the same way as "Why Don't Straight Men Read Novels?"
Yeah. Well, and we wouldn't talk about it if it did.
We look at that and think that's a pretty reasonable piece of analysis, and then forget about it.
Yeah, I think the most interesting point that it raises here is as an intersectional issue where it says that boys on free school meals read less than anyone else. Because I do believe that. I do. Yeah, I don't know that I think it matters that much what you read, but I just think reading in general is positive. Not always, but generally speaking. And so I think that for me, I'm like, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's, problem to solve,
Sure.
Just figure it out. Put our heads together. But I think the point as well, kind of going off of that, is that I thought was interesting here was that what men are reading, the nonfiction books, like you said, the hustle culture, this and that, it's good. It's good to read this and that, but I don't know, that perpetual, I do agree with the article on that perpetual kind of push towards, just those types of books I don't find that helpful. Like, I don't know, my dad as of late has been really into those types of books, and he's been like incredibly successful. And I'm like, Dad, you don't need to read those. You've already done what these books are trying to teach you how to do.
Yeah.
And like some of them he'll read and be like, yeah, no, I already knew that. I didn't need to read that. And I'm like, I know, I could have told you that. Like, anyways, those are two unrelated thoughts. But I think that is all right. So maybe I'll backtrack and say maybe not reading everything is necessarily good, because if you take boys on free school meals and all you give them are these kind of like hustle culture type of, maximization books, do you produce someone who is actually better off for having read that? I don't know. Probably not. Most of those books I tend to find they're like one Twitter post wrapped up in somehow it takes 8 chapters to get there.
That's the key. That's the hint that you should maybe be a little bit more skeptical of what this has to offer.
Yeah. So anyways, I like the article though. It gave me a lot to think about. It wasn't well written. I wouldn't go back to it, but it was like generated conversation.
Yeah, I think it was better than, and I think this is, we'll maybe go to this very, very quickly. Then I'm sure if you're on social media at all, you had this week going through this article, then the article, The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books, which essentially is diving into a trend in higher education of moving away from long novels into short stories, primarily for teaching college students, because they don't read as many full novels in high school anymore. And so they're doomed. Why they are doomed because of it. Not necessarily. That's what some of the people in the article say. Not necessarily the conclusion of the article itself. I want to feel.
I don't know. I didn't read it. I was going to have you summarize it to me, like a little baby.
No, that's fair. I mean, that's essentially the idea of the article. The article is not badly written. It just, I mean, that's the idea of the article is whether do we adapt to the times where students are not reading as long novels as much, or do we stick to our guns? There are a few problems with it. As one person asked, this is for The Atlantic, who normally, I think I mentioned before, I do not read. And in fact, I specifically avoid The Atlantic. I have no love for the publication. In fact, some enmity towards it.
After what period of your life?
When after the period of my life where I read it. I read every single issue, cover to beginning, cover to end. And then I think I was, it was maybe 2018, and the editor who gave this incredible softball interview to Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, and it was like just so personally disgusting to me that he would give an incredible softball interview about a man of like, oh, isn't it great how you stand up for women's rights for a guy who's imprisoning women for driving a car? That was the point that I realized that their whole mission statement was not true, and they were not there to speak truth to power in any meaningful sense, but rather to speak power to the people of what they should be thinking. Neither here nor there.
I love that that's your line in the sand. Like that's that I'm done.
I mean, I after that I began to think about a lot more about if that was the kind of interview he does. I thought about his leadership and his editorship of it, and I began to look at what he was approving, and I began to approve it less and less. But yes, that's fair.
Which is when you started your competing journal, The Pacific.
Yes, exactly. But so there are a lot of reactions to this in our Discord. I will say my personal reaction was, this is an article which everything in it is true, and this is my main problem with like analyses like these that come from mainstream media sources. Not untrue, but there are just so many things in it that feel like they should be an article in and of themselves that are just like a one-off mention. Because like the overall conclusion of this piece is essentially like, why you like it'd be good if people read full novels. It'd be better for them to do that than what we're doing right now. And that's not an untrue statement, I think, on the whole. It's just so unrelated to everything else they're writing about that it borders on being a non sequitur. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Especially if and one person asked us, like, hey, what do they say about the impact of the pandemic and lockdown on students reading? And the thing is, I didn't think about that. Not one single word about how 2 years of homeschooling, essentially. I mean, not literal homeschooling, but taking school from home in a way that I don't recognize. Not at all mentioned. Seems like that'd be important for this. If we're talking about incoming college students today, seems like it'd be important to mention the fact that they are not going through a normal amount of schooling that the rest of us who are reading this presumably did. That seems like bordering on journalistic malpractice to not address that. Or thinking about, there's one paragraph where the author says, a lot of students today are more focused on getting a job. So they're spending more time getting an actual paying job. They're spending more time getting internships. That's been reflected in survey data. And so they're less interested in actually learning in college. Feels like there should be a couple follow-up questions there. There are not. And that is my central problem with this, is that there's so many points in this article. That point, another point where they lay a responsibility essentially for this. The article does at the feet of policies like No Child Left Behind and Common Core, moving towards standardized education and being able to fill out tests rather than having critical thinking skills. And then it never engages with any of those ideas beyond one or two sentences. And that's my real problem with this and every other sort of article in this kind of sphere in the mainstream media. And I feel like some kind of like Alex Jones type saying that, but like they're not good at it because it's not their main job and they've got a very limited amount of time to write about it. And there's so many things here where feels like you should be interrogating that, and they just never do. And it feels incredibly hollow because of that. Yeah.
Oh, I like when they critique like students' attention spans, then only to, do that same thing where they, kind of sequitur away without engaging too much, just to kind of keep you interested in reading.
Right. It's bad that Gen Z does this, but we're not going to engage at all in the ideas of why they might be doing this.
Yeah, I think it's a much bigger issue. I do agree that it is an issue, though.
Right.
Having been someone that was teaching at that level, and especially in like upper level classes too, where you would expect students to have, I don't want to say like have read certain novels or whatever, but just like to have a certain understanding of the pace of a college course and the amount that you would be reading in a humanities class. And we did not assign very much reading, and it still sometimes wasn't done.
Sure. Yeah. Which I think is increasingly true. So I don't want to dump on this article too much, because I think it is addressing an important question. The framing around the elite college students who can't read books is this unnecessary fear-mongering, because it's not just the elite college students, it's every college student. And maybe everyone beyond that too.
It is, but there's something specific, I think, about like, I will say, like, It was a problem. I guess, I don't know. Maybe my undergrad was also an elite institution, I guess, but
George Washington University, America's most
the George Washington
elite
University. That's right. The
excuse me, yeah.
Maybe. There was some perception I had though of like the tier of schools that was above that, where I thought these students must be like geniuses. Really what it is, and of course you can talk about, you know, family connections, wealth, all this stuff, which undoubtedly plays into that. But really the difference in the students that are there is they're better at figuring out what you want. They're not necessarily any better at delivering anything. It's just that they know the questions to ask. They follow up. They're really like a little pushy almost, you know, and figuring out like how they're going to be assessed, what they're going to be assessed on. They're really kind of specific with that. And what I found is you just kind of have to build your course assessments the best you can to incentivize them to do what you want. I mean, it sounds stupid, but like that helps.
Right. They're too good.
You want them to do the reading? Well, you're going to be tested on the reading. All of a sudden, everyone does the reading. Great. It wasn't that
Right.
hard. You're going to recycle the same test you've been doing since 1970? Well, no one's going to do your stuff, you know?
It's on ratemyteacher.com.
Yeah, like literally. Yeah, you have to make it. This was like my thing was you have to challenge them. You really have to challenge them because they want it. They just don't know
Sure.
it. And then because all these students are doing is they're doing like a cost benefit analysis of, you know, okay, if this class is a joke and it's really not going to help me, then why am I going to put any work in? But they really care about their GPAs. And if you're serious about, you know, giving them below a B plus, they will do the work.
Yeah. Well,
I had to kind of mildly threaten my students into it, but they liked it.
I think that, well, obviously they did. Naturally, they would.
Naturally. Thank you.
Of course. I do think that feeds back into that idea of maybe the idea we should be interrogating here is what is with the overwhelming need to look at how this impacts your career. And I'm not saying that because like that's stupid. It does. It's like it's a very reasonable way to look at the world. It
actually is. I feel so bad though, because like that's what we pitch a lot of these students on is you go to college, you get into a great school like Northwestern, like that can change your life if you're from a low income family. So when I have students like that who are like, I need a good GPA, like I need to, you know, I can't spend time on this because I'm interning. And I'm like, I can't be mad at that because my class really, like, it's not going to be the make or break for their financial security in the future. And I understand that.
No, and it's true because I kind of went through college and I came from a family who was maybe the opposite of both these articles we were talking about. I was encouraged to read. I was encouraged to just read for the fun of it. I was actually encouraged to stop reading because I kept reading in class, and that was the thing that I had to set up. My teachers had to set up little ways to find the ways I would sneak reading into class. I just loved it too much.
He's reading about the bomb again.
And I went through college kind of being like, with like a very romantic idea of I'm just going to learn what I want to learn and I'm going to get the right job for me. It didn't work that way. I did spend 2 years doing healthcare after training to be either in the foreign service or in journalism. And frankly, it was a little bit of luck and a term of service in AmeriCorps that got me into actual journalism. And that was an incredible amount of luck. So my perspective going in and not doing that really did materially hurt me financially and career-wise. like that's why I think it's really important to analyze that of just being like, well, this is what students are focused on these days. Like, yeah, because every single job they're applying for wants 2 years of experience, no matter how entry level they are. There are jobs which I had in college which I no longer qualify for. I was recently. I have a new job recently, and when I was on the job hunt, there were jobs which I literally did in college, again, which I no longer qualify for, even though I have already done them, even with the same organizations I did them with, because these standards have risen so much, which is unbelievable to me. Like, yeah, the stuff I did, you barely needed a functioning brain to do it, and now they're asking for a college degree for something that I didn't need a degree for, I didn't need any training for, but they want degree and experience for. It's absurd to me. And when you say this about students, it's like I am almost enraged that you have no further questions about what this might imply about our job market or the every other thing they're considering, because I think that's way more important, and that's where I think articles like this really fall short.
So I think the real disaster, though, This is my opinion. I think like a lot of the social sciences, I think that's kind of ruined it. I think that's contributed to that sentiment a little bit. I feel like with the hard sciences, like, you know, you're really trained on some sort of scientific method, some kind of production, some sort of real specific skill set. With the humanities, of course, you know, we do whatever it is we do. In the social sciences, you get not exactly either, and I think a lot of those are the majors, especially at the undergraduate level, where students feel trapped. That sort of, I have not developed any skills, I can do nothing. I know that feeling because I studied international relations. That's how I felt when I was done. And I felt that going to a humanities PhD was better than my career prospects out of that degree. And so you can definitely understand that desire to try to career maximize after that, especially with how much debt it takes to get through there. But honestly, like a lot of the jobs that I see my friends who have like similar social sciences degrees, like they probably would have been better off just having fun and reading for 4 years, you know, rather than sweating it out doing whatever they were doing.
Right.
You could have learned whatever skill you needed to on whatever that job is.
No, that's the thing is, I have, my career has been directly benefited by the fact that I have very often come into organizations that are desperate for a particular role, and I will fill that role. And when I leave, they offer it to someone almost always who has a master's degree. I like the last role I left. Literally, the person who replaced me, they wanted someone who had a master's degree in journalism and was bilingual to do the exact same job I did. It's like
yeah.
That you can't. There's so much that today, if you're a young person getting a job, that they will say to you, you need these qualifications, and I will tell you, realistically, you really truly don't. And that is the challenge: is that almost none of these jobs need that much education to do. But they will demand it anyway.
No, by far my brightest students were the ones who kind of, you know, they were just like a strange random major, you know, maybe you're like a film major, but you see the world in a very certain way. I don't think that's necessarily a result of that type of person. Like, you know, again, it's the same debate. Like, I don't know that's necessarily because they read so many novels. They're so great. Like, you know, that's not why they were reading those. They had like this other drive, right?
Yeah.
And that led them to do those things and to, you know, understand the world, understand art in a certain way. I don't know that that's necessarily something you can 100% cultivate. I don't think like, you know, I don't necessarily think giving novels to people who don't like reading is going to change that.
Right. No, I mean, that's like,
we're doomed, I think.
we're just doomed. That's our note for today.
I love this though. A lot of contemporary ideas of empathy are built on identification, identity politics. Reading is more complicated than that. Like, I mean, like, okay, should you be teaching at Berkeley if like you're going to be that condescending to your students? You know,
that's a good question.
I'll say it.
I do think, yeah, that's a good question to ask.
I didn't read this article. I was
skimming.
Just like I said.
Well, I mean, even the idea of identity politics, that's where like, oh, you're just going to dunk on it. There's so much to engage with there. Even if you want to reject it, you could. The original creators of the term identity politics do to a certain degree. The Combahee River Collective, because they have a different analytic role for that particular idea. That's just like, I don't know. There's a lot to engage with there.
Also, again, like, do you think the point of reading is to enlarge your sympathies? Right. I don't know.
That's a great point.
I know that's a very common way of thinking. Like, oh, it'll make you morally better. It'll make you, you know, more understanding, more sympathetic. That is, it could. It's true. But is that more important than the fact that it's just fun?
Right. That you're able to build these skills. I think it is an important feature, but I don't think it's...
No building skills.
No skills.
No skills. I will not be skillful. I solemnly swear that I will be up to no skills.
That's...
I will only read to be useless. That's it.
And which is a valid way to go about it. I think both ways are important features for...
will love that.
Well, I think that's our new campaign.
Yep. Read
to waste your time.
Read to waste your time. Yes.
I do want to go quickly to a couple reader comments here as before we wrap up. One person...
Yeah, they actually read it, so they should.
Yeah, they had some good points, which are sympathetic ones. I think there are a lot of sympathetic articles to this point, and I think that's very fair because, as one person said, thanks for this. A few years back, I was traveling to the States most years, and I noticed two things were always increasing. More and more, everyone was using the same vocabulary, e.g., deep dive, but there was also this enormous, palpable, all-pervading restlessness. It was way more than not being able to read a book, more like hardly anyone could sit still and just talk with you. But I know a couple of teachers of youngish kids, one teaching bilingually, who have just refused to concede to see it. I think that might have been in response to me specifically saying that I questioned the focus on young people, or no, it wasn't. That was something else I was thinking of. That person is just responding to the article, which is I think a fair point. I think more people rather than reading are maybe going to TikTok, reading posts on Instagram, whatever, social media. And I don't mean to be that old guy being like, well, all these kids are on TikTok today, but a lot of people are, and a lot of people are reading things, and I can't count the number of times someone has told me something that I found a little hard to believe, and I say, oh, really? Where'd you learn that? And they say, oh, I saw this TikTok about it. Yeah, or my good friend of mine who's a research scientist all the time, she's got younger friends or coworkers who say, oh, I saw this really interesting science fact on TikTok. Can I tell you about it? And she listens, and basically whoever has given this, made this video has gotten this idea so wrong that it becomes something almost more than it is, and it is basically always true every single time, that they have never accurately conveyed these science facts, even though that's what they purport to do, and they are getting tens, if not hundreds of thousands more views than a friend like mine who is not on social media could ever hope to say, no, that's not an accurate depiction of what this particular isotope or whatever it is the case may be. Which is unfortunate. That's rough, and I think that is contributing towards a more monolithic culture. That's a bigger conversation of the algorithm and what kind of subcultures it sorts us into. But it is a worthwhile one to have. Probably keep having forever until we die in our new world.
Well, until we're consumed by the algorithm.
That's right.
That's right. I know that's right.
Another person noted that their coworkers' ability to follow written instructions have decreased to the point where I'm having real trouble with training people using methods previously effective. You kind of noted something along those lines. I have recently joked that I might have to start a TikTok account to teach them. Yeah, you might actually have to. That might be the new world we live in. I don't know.
I don't know. I go back and forth on it because I do think it is a real impediment that previous generations probably didn't have, just the expectation of something being so instant, so quick, that being kind of the norm. I can definitely see why that would be frustrating for learning, especially when learning is not something that you're going to always pick up immediately. But at the same time, I just think that, I don't know, not to lay it at the feet of teachers or professors, but I feel like with my students, it just took a little bit of a readjustment into really considering some of their motivations for taking the class and trying my best to make it relevant for them as much as I possibly could. And when you fail to make it relevant as a TA, well, hey, it's going to be on the exam, so it's going to be relevant in like 3 weeks, right. So you better learn it. So I don't know. I don't think I don't think we're doomed. I mean, I talk to plenty of smart young people every day. Like, we'll be fine. Plus, I listen to like my parents and their friends talk about what they were doing in college, and it was much worse.
Yeah.
We just weren't writing articles about it once a week. So
well, that does make me think about how much the effect of just being able to write down your reality makes me think of the town I used to live in. Objectively is much more violent than the Bay Area, but the Bay Area is perpetuating the cycle of, hey, look, crimes are up. We're all going to die, even if crimes are not actually up. And then where I came from was, by every measure, more violent by an extreme factor than where I grew up. And no one I met in that town ever was panicked about it, which might partially have been because there is no news there whatsoever. And so unless it happened to someone you knew or within earshot, it functionally didn't happen.
Well,
but
I say stop writing these moral panic articles about young people because it only exacerbates the problem that you're concerned about.
It's, well, on the other hand, it is something that it is an immemorial, it is maybe the greatest feature that has been passed down by the human race. Our generation was fine, but the young people today, they're the real problem. That's been from Plato to now, from ages way beyond Plato, from Plato being mad about books to, I don't know, the very first human being who could speak being mad that, their kids developed a new word, which was not traditional in my days.
Frindle. God, I hate a frindle. That was the first moral panic.
Yeah. From frindle to now. From frindle to steam.
Yep.
There's always something to take the kids away from learning.
Always some. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's just crazy. Also because the secondary, I think the point there is that whenever you say about what the kids should be learning, it's always something that's never that educational, but it is.
It's something I saw on TikTok.
Yeah, well, it's something you'd love for them to be able to repeat without really knowing. I'd love for them to be able to repeat facts about the Iliad or the Odyssey or, I don't know, Ovid or whatever, because it makes them sound smart. It's not about them having critical faculties, because that might lead them to question some other things about their society or their home or whatever, which is a lot less fun for parents. So
if you are the parent of a kid and you're saying to them, I wish you knew XYZ about Ovid, I promise at one point in their life they will, because your kids will be fine. I promise. I promise. I can only imagine what's going to happen. This is going to have to be, not that this would be way too intrusive, but what happens to our particular children. I can only imagine what kind of. Oh, I'm going to be putting it on TikTok.
Oh, okay, perfect. Well, I'll be watching, following along with all the rest of you.
No, I'm definitely giving birth to a jock who won't be able to spell.
God, with our luck, that is who we would have. We would have. I mean, it's like I came from a football. I came from a jock. I think it's time that that the pendulum swings back, and I have a child who's a jock again.
It returns. Yeah, it's kind of the great equilibrium of the universe. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe we should wrap up before we get to a little bit too particular here. A little too specific.
Yeah, we're way over time, so.
Yeah.
Hey. What are you going to do?
Well, before I completely head out, Matt, I have to ask, what are we going to tackle next week?
Should look that up.
I think it's To Hell with Poets by...
Yep, by...
I'm going to let you pronounce that.
That's messed up. I should look to see. Oh, no. I'm going phonetically on this. The first Friday of November, we'll be back with To Hell with... What is it? We'll be back with To Hell with Poets by Bakhtigul Sarmakova. If you're planning on reading along with us, be sure to pick up your copy through our affiliate links on our website. To help keep our show independent and for exclusive access to notes containing all the research that went into this deeply researched episode, head on over to our website, SlavicLitPod.com. Before we let you go, we want to extend a sincere thank you to all of our current supporters.
Yes, and that is Alice, Dearball, Cynthia, Seamus, Camille, Emma, Lauren, Erica, Michelle, Juliana, Diane, Oleg, John, Timex, Melissa, Baron, Aldo, Ben, Gabe, George, Claire, Amy, Allie, Soraya, Jackson, Molly, Emma, Mike, Marianne, Mickey, Eric, Reagan, Mike, Peter, Eric, Ben, Claire, Jeff, Inez, Mai, Robert, Joseph, Daniel, Lou, Nina, Gary, Janice, Mary, Anne, Isaac, Emily, Amanda, Caitlin, Yitza, Irene, and Pack Rob. The music used in this episode was Starai Kino by Paramotka. You can find more of their stuff on Bandcamp or Spotify. The links and spelling are in the show notes.
You'll hear from us again soon.